Welcome everyone. Welcome to the CoinRock Show. We have about half an hour of prep, and then we will get. Um, we have a guest joining the show today, so it's going to be very interesting because this is something we haven't covered much on the show, which is Bitcoin mining and geopolitics. So that's going to be in about half an hour from now. Welcome everyone. Share this in the different groups. In the meantime, over the next half hour or so, we will be, where am I here? We will be talking about some of the news over the last week. We haven't done actually a live stream in, what is it, 10 days now, maybe? About 10 days. Last week, a lot of events around token 2049, one of the top 3 crypto events in the world. A lot of alpha, a lot of in real IRL, in real life relationships and meetings. And honestly, that's where you get all the alpha. It's not in Telegram groups, it's not on Discord. It's when you meet people face to face. That's when the real alpha drops, because people can tell you things face to face that they cannot post online, that they can't even tweet. They can't not even tweet. Forget about tweeting. That they can't even share in private groups or just send you through DM. So the real alpha, for those who really want to make money in anything, really, and to succeed in any industry, will always be in-person events. When I started my first business back in 2007 in digital marketing, digital advertising, the first thing I did, I'd been selling online for years, but the first thing I did when I said, okay, I'm going to commit to building businesses, I booked a ticket to San Francisco. I was in Switzerland at the time, booked a ticket all like on my own, flew, went to a conference. And this is before conferences were cool. This was just geeks and nerds in a room in 2007, in September 2007 in San Francisco. And from those relationships, I mean, I've had multiple partnerships, multiple business relationships that are extremely profitable from that one event. So if you want to succeed in any industry, you have to meet people face to face. And so, crypto is no different. If you want the alpha, if you want to be in the if you want to be in the real private groups, you have to meet people face to face. That's how you build trust. That's how you build relationships and friendships, of course. There's only so much you can do virtually and remote. If you want the alpha, if you want to build in any industry, you're gonna have to meet people face to face. That's my and I've done this several times, right, through over the last 20 years in the industries that I'm involved in. When it comes to digital advertising, marketing, I'm telling you, that's the first thing I did in 2007. I bought I think the ticket was like $500, which at the time was a lot of money for me. And that was just the seminar, the conference access. Then of course you have to get your flight ticket, you have to get accommodation. I actually shared a room at the hotel with someone who became a very good friend of mine over the years. And it's those guerrilla stories, right? So those bootstrap stories when you start out. But the point being here that you have to go out, meet people face to face, even if it's in your local city. You don't need to travel halfway around the world, but just meeting people face to face in the same industry. I guarantee you there's people around you, not too far from you, that you can actually connect face to face with. So that's what happened last week. Let's have a look here. The team, I'm waiting for some links from the team. And if we can push this out to the groups. So All right. All right. So in the meantime, we're gonna have a look at some of the news here. I'm gonna share my screen. There's quite a few headlines that that popped up over the last 10 days, of course. I'm gonna share my screen. Give me just a sec here. We have someone extremely influential here on the homepage of CoinRock Media. So let's just add share screen. All right, so window, and this should be it. This is it. All right, window and share. All right, welcome to those who are just joining. Welcome to the CoinRock Show. Let me put you back on the big screen here and flip it, and we're good. All right, so we have a special guest coming up in about 30 minutes. We'll be talking about. It'll be an interesting one because we're going to talk about something that we don't cover much. We haven't covered on the show yet. As you guys know, we really want to bring interesting guests, not just interesting, but people who actually do things. And there you go. That's what I wanted to do. And who also do different things, right? So, we've had macro specialists, we've had trading specialists, we've had marketing experts, we've had, oh my God, we've had co-founders, big co-founders, we've had entrepreneurs, we've had investors. Today we have someone who is very deep into Bitcoin mining, and also very involved when it comes to geopolitics. And that's one of the topics that I actually want to cover with him is crypto and the impact of crypto when it comes to global relationships between countries. So we'll get to that in about 25 minutes. Now look at this. Guess what, guys? It's choppy again. I mean, I've been saying this for months, right? Hovering between the low 80s, mid 90s, mid to low mid 90s, now 93K. Everything's pretty much red in the top 100 today. So, nothing much to report, to be honest. Choppy range, nothing new, boring. The tourists are not around. That was also one of the main topics last week at the events, right? There's very little retail interest today in crypto. That's the truth, right? So I don't want to sound pessimistic today, but the truth is retail doesn't really care about crypto today. That's the truth, right? So last week there was a lot of B2B. So a lot of companies, call them, corporates, when it comes to deal making and partnerships and everything at the events. But there was no euphoria. Some of the events were a bit empty. And as you guys know, I'm not surprised. I've been saying this for months. There has been no bullish catalyst when it comes to price action since January. We're in May now. So yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to be bearish. I'm not bearish, but I'm also a realist, and there's really nothing super exciting that's been happening over the last few weeks and months. As long as there is uncertainty coming from the US government, we're going to see this, right? Choppy, mid 80s, mid 90s, maybe we touch 100K, but we're not getting that next leg up until there's clarity, And so, I really don't believe that we're in a super bullish phase. I talked about this a few weeks ago, as you guys know, for those who are on the show. We talked about, let me just push this out too. We talked about the fact that, oops, yeah. Here, this could take 6 or 12 months. I said that months ago. So, it's been three solid months of choppy sideways action now. The occasional pump, but everything retraces. This week is going to be huge. We have a lot of news coming out of the US later this week, Thursday, Friday. So we'll see how that impacts the market. But honestly, until we see anything, any certainty from the US government when it comes to tariffs, that's one thing. Then it comes to interest rates, the printing. I saw an interesting theory the other day. I don't remember who posted this. That the Fed would probably not actually go into QE the way QE is known by the market. They would still inject liquidity. They would still bring, what we expect them to bring, but it wouldn't be in the tried and true form of QE. Very interesting to see. I don't know. That was an interesting thesis or theory. The Fed will do something at some point. Question is when. No one knows. You see big funds, right? The rainmakers of the financial world saying, "Oh, it's going to be in the next month or two." Others say it's going to be in Q4. And to be fair, it's not about just knowing and being connected, right, to people at the Fed. That's one thing. I mean, when you look at the masters of the universe when it comes to finance, right, the BlackRocks of the world, of course, they have extremely strong relationships with everyone else, with the other rainmakers in the space, right? Namely, of course, the Fed. That being said, the Fed doesn't, the Fed has a mandate, and so they will shift and pivot and do something when they feel they need to. So, we'll see. I don't know. It could be a month, it could be 2 months, it could be 6 months. We've had, and there's very convincing theories and scenarios that make sense for both a shift coming in the next month and having a bullish summer, which I think the market is very tired. That's also something I felt last week at the events. People are just checked out. It's been absolutely brutal. A lot of projects are struggling in different ways. Some of them are struggling with actually, having product market fit. Others are struggling just recruiting. Others are struggling just because there's so much competition, or because, if you don't, it's the industry is also consolidating. So the bigger players are acquiring or absorbing smaller players. So things are moving much faster than in the previous cycles. But overall, definitely a lot of fatigue. I'd say cycle fatigue. And we'll see. We'll see. Look, I mean, if you're just joining now and you're like, oh man, Matthias is bearish. It's like, I'm not. I said this for months now. I said short term, choppy / bearish, right? You have to understand that there is no bullish catalyst today for crypto. And I've heard smart people say in February, in March, in April, oh, next leg up imminent. I'm like, no, not seeing that, bro. Like, not seeing that. And we're not seeing that. We haven't seen that. So I've stuck to my guns, despite some of my very close friends were like, oh man, this is, bullish setup back in March. I'm like, no, bro, this is not bullish at all. April, bullish. No, this is not bullish at all. It will be bullish. There will be a time where everything sends, but we're not there yet. There's a lot of things that need to change. And crypto is just a small, like I said, it's a small boat, right? The bigger industries, right? The bond markets, treasuries, even real estate, even gold, much bigger than crypto. So anything that happens to those bigger ships, those tankers, will affect, of course, crypto. Am I bullish mid to long term? Yes, of course, super bullish. Otherwise, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be doing these shows. Like, there's much better things for me to do than doing these CoinRock shows. But in the short term, until we see something happening, whether it's the U.S. government giving some sort of certainty, I will say I just saw a clip from Besant. I think it was yesterday, saying that kind of being incapable of really giving a clear answer to the reporter who's asking him, hey, what's happening with these tariffs? I don't know if you guys saw, but Trump wants to tariff non-US movies. Yeah. And so the question was, okay, how long is this gonna how long is the market gonna have to put up with these tariffs and the uncertainty? And Besson was not very comfortable on camera yesterday, which also, if you just look at the body language, it also is it indicates that, maybe inside within the Trump team, there's also different camps. Some are like, hey, all right, tariffs are great. I think the markets have shown that we need more certainty. And then another group saying like, no, fuck it, let's just they can stomach the volatility for now. So we'll see. I think, being first week of May here, I think that I've talked about a relief bounce. I don't think this is the next gig ascend, but I definitely think that a relief bounce is long overdue. Again, I don't think it's the full send if we don't get any news or any change when it comes to so from the Fed or the U.S. government. One thing I wanted to cover today is, I think he's still, yes, Warren Buffett. You know what's funny about Buffett? So over the weekend, they did the Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholder meeting in a stadium, an arena. Amazing. And so he announced that he would be retiring. He's 94 years old. Okay. He's been he so Buffett and his partner, who now passed recently, Charlie Munger, they built Berkshire Hathaway into what it is now. And he's been the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway for 60 years. I think it's always interesting. I think, Buffett has had a huge impact on my thinking, on my business career in general. The way he thinks, the way he sees the world, and the way he acts in very I think everyone can learn a lot just by reading his books, the letters, his investor letters. And I think that Buffett gets so much disrespect from the crypto crowd. To me, it's laughable to see the crypto community sometimes just diss one of the richest and wisest men in history, because he's never really understood tech. He invested very late into Apple, despite being very well connected with Bill Gates over 20 plus years ago. And he made he could have invested much earlier into tech, but it was never really his thing. If you haven't read the Buffett books, the letters, you should. If you want to make more money, if you want to keep more of the money that you make, you should be studying and reading about Warren Buffett and his thoughts and his strategies and just the way he thinks. He's one of a kind. What's great about him is that he has both the money and the wisdom to match the money. A lot of people have wisdom, but they don't have the money. And a lot of people have money, but they're just, they're retarded. Like, they're literally unintelligent people, or they have no wisdom. Very few people on earth have that type of money plus the wisdom over decades. And I think that everyone should study and be be open to the lessons that Buffett shares through, whether it's the shareholder videos, whether it's the books. So, there's a lot of value to, incredible value, just studying the brain of someone like that. He's truly one of a kind. I have made a lot of money just basically studying and reading his books and his thoughts. Um, I think, especially when it comes to crypto, it's always a bit funny for me to see how much how much shit he gets. Um, and it's sad because crypto bros would make a lot more money just studying someone who actually has made hundreds of billions of dollars. And not only about the money, it's about the way he's led his life, and very humble, very a very peaceful life, very chill, very boring in a way. But at the same time, he literally commands one of the richest and biggest war chests in business. They have over $300 billion cash today they can deploy. And one of the things that I think everyone should or can really learn from Buffett is that, you know, just because you have money, just because you have cash, just because you have liquidity, does not mean you need to spend it today to invest in something or acquire something or spend it on, materialistic stuff. There's a lot of power in stacking money and keeping money, saving money. And, people say, oh, yeah, well, inflation, Matt, inflation, Matthias, what do you think of inflation? I'm like, bro, of course, inflation sucks, but being able to deploy large amounts of money when there's an opportunity, that's how you make generational money. It's not, it's you need to be comfortable saving up money, stacking up money, especially if there's nothing interesting in the markets. I think everyone here can, get another job, get a side gig, just to save money, put that away, save it. And yes, inflation is real. Does it mean you need to invest everything immediately? No. They're sitting on $300 billion. And he said it the other day. He said, we see opportunities every single week. Like, there's clips on Twitter. You can check this out. We see opportunities every single week. Sometimes we don't make a move for months. Imagine someone who has hundreds of billions of dollars cash, liquid, and he can deploy into anything. And just by Buffett being Buffett, anything he buys, he's the ultimate business KOL, right? He can go into any undervalued company and literally pump it just because everyone would follow. Oh, Buffett's buying this, we have to buy this. He doesn't do that. He's like, yeah, for months, sometimes years, we don't make any major acquisitions, no major investments, and they've been stacking up money. And when they feel comfortable, then they can go all in into something, which, by the way, they never go all in. Something else about diversification, everything. But again, extremely beneficial for everyone, for those who are willing to read and learn, or even watch documentaries about him. He's genuinely one of the financial geniuses, one of the smartest people in finance in history. We have the guest joining in about 10 minutes. So team, just catch up on the messages here. If you can tell the guest that I'm going to take a quick break in about 8-9 minutes. And then we'll take about 2-3 minutes, so 2-3 minute break, and then we'll come back with our surprise guest. A few headlines here I just want to go through. We talked a lot about Buffett today. This is interesting. This is Kraken. So Kraken posted you can find this on the official Kraken account. Blocks a suspected North Korean infiltration attempt, someone posing as a developer wanting to work at Kraken. This is nothing new for us. We've seen this. And we talked about this actually last week at one of the events. I was talking about another VC, and they've seen this too, especially over the last 12 months, like a rise in hackers posing as developers trying to get a job. Of course, if you hire them, you're fucked. So it's very smart it's not, and by the way, it's not just the North Koreans, right? A lot of rogue developers try to get jobs and you need to have robust mechanisms. And I won't go into detail at all about how what we do, how we do it. But this is a constant threat for sure. It's good that Kraken is shining a light. When it comes to, again, state actors exploit remote hiring. A lot of roles today in crypto, and of course outside of crypto, are remote. So, and now with AI, you can actually simulate and you can get a lot of the interview questions right just through running the interview. So if you don't show your face, if you're looking at AI, even if you show your face, by the way, uh, AI is so fast now, you can actually answer go through an interview successfully, and pretend you're someone else. So again, this is going to be a problem for not just crypto companies, by the way, for every company. Imagine if you have like a team of hackers that get hired at Google or Facebook and have access to like critical data and infrastructure. That's a problem, right? So this is something that it's not, of course, not crypto, but this was interesting because Kraken posted it. If you want to read the full post, it's on their blog. A few other articles here. I'll probably just pull up one or two. UK regulator launches public consultation on crypto rules. Again, more countries moving into crypto. This is what you want to see happening during these pullbacks, right? These kind of dead times in the market is you want to see, the FCA. So the FCA is the equivalent to the US SEC, has launched a public consultation as part of its push to introduce formal legislation for crypto. This is very good. A few years ago, they literally wanted nothing to do with crypto. And so this is very good. Of course, we're not at the full send time of the cycle yet, but this is what you want to see when we're in these kind of boring times. This is something I think we'll end with this article before taking a quick break and then getting our guest on for today, because this is something I want to cover today during the conversation. The CIA says that Bitcoin is an asset in the tech race against China. So, of course, digital assets now have become so mainstream, and there's real money backing everything and involved in the industry. So CIA deputy director says in a rare public nod to cryptocurrency's growing geopolitical relevance, CIA deputy director described Bitcoin as both a strategic asset and a potential vulnerability. Rivalry against China. As these industries grow, of course, there's always an arms race. And crypto having grown so much over the last 10 years and so fast, it gets to a point where even if, and we talked about this on the show, right? Even if a country does not like crypto, if a government does not like crypto, it becomes so widespread. So the use of crypto in this case becomes so widespread that you have to embrace it. Otherwise, your neighboring countries, your enemies, your rivals embrace it. And so with that, we talked about this too. I said, countries that embrace crypto are going to attract talent, attract investors, attract, of course, money, attract free media, free reporting. Look at El Salvador. I can guarantee you, if you polled Twitter today, crypto Twitter, about do you even know where El Salvador is, they would be incapable of placing it. Today, thanks to Bitcoin, they're in the headlines at least every week because either they buy 1 or 2 Bitcoin a week, or they are closely connected with the Trump administration, or they're mining Bitcoin too. So it's free advertising. So we're getting to a point now where intelligence agencies publicly, and look, they've known about Bitcoin for 15 years now, right? Nothing new. I mean, they've known about crypto for decades. So this is like nothing new when it comes to, you can even look at the Freedom of Information Act. Cryptocurrency has been around for decades for them. when it comes to recognizing it publicly and almost endorsing it as a need or an important geopolitical tool, this is new, and this is very good for the industry. Again, the risk, I think the biggest thing that we can take away from this cycle is that the risk of Bitcoin going to zero is extremely unlikely, is probably close to zero. And this is also one of the drivers of that, right? So this is what you want to see. Of course, bad actors, drug cartels, terrorist groups use crypto. So this is nothing new. We've known about this. This is a well-known fact. That being said, yes, there is an arms race, right? It's always a question of, okay, if we don't embrace it, the enemy will. And so what if they embrace it better and faster than us? Then it creates a weakness in our system. So again, it's not about them liking it, it's them needing to embrace it and in this case acknowledge it publicly. So with that being said, let's take a quick 3 to 4 minute break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about geopolitics. The show will be around 40 to 45 minutes today, and I will just hop off here for a few moments. Let me just put you guys down here. And the team, if you can get everything ready, we should be good to go. Welcome for those who are just joining. We have a guest in the next few minutes. Taking a quick break now for a few minutes, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes with the guest for a special CoinRock conversation here about Bitcoin mining, and geopolitics when it comes to crypto and Bitcoin. We'll be right back. Hey, Matthias here, and if you're enjoying this and want access to even more alpha, early stage deals and opportunities, and also behind the scenes insights on the markets, hit the link in the description and make sure you're subscribed. It's free and it puts you ahead of the curve. Let's get back to the show. There you go. Dennis, you should be on.
Hi.
Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting.
So, put you on the big screen. Very good. So, welcome, Dennis, to the CoinRock Show. I'm very excited about this episode because, like I said, I always say this to the audience. We try to bring very interesting guests with different backgrounds, and you have backgrounds in many different industries, starting out with, and I want you to talk about your story too, commodities, and before that, more on the policy side, commodities, private equity, and then going into Bitcoin and mining, starting 2017, a very diverse background. And so I want you to tell the story. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for invitation. Yeah, about my background, I think this is one of the interesting parts because, first of all, if you look at Bitcoin mining specifically, people come from different ways of life, let's say professionally and non-professionally. My personal background, I came, I spent 12 years at IFI, International Financial Institution. It's EBRD, which is similar to IFC. So this is a very conservative, organization, as part of a World Bank ecosystem. And after that, I went into the traditional metals and mining, gold, copper, and rare earth metals, which is at the moment they're popularly called critical raw materials, private equity. And then back in 2017, I was asked basically to by a group of two groups of investors to join a project which was sort of starting piloting in Kazakhstan. And this is the 2017 was the time when we had the first reverse takeovers, when actual Bitcoin mining operators were trying to enter the capital market. It was not as easy as it is now. So obviously the access to capital markets was actually, you have to do a reverse takeover listing. And one of the popular destinations was in Canada. because of my background from traditional metals and mining, because many, let's say, RTO targets were actually shell companies were mining juniors, and this was a part of, let's say, my journey, how it started. I was invited by a group of investors to come in Kazakhstan because the project was originally starting with 1 megawatt and eventually went to 152 megawatts in Kazakhstan, and to, let's say, to join this journey of trying to take it, let's say, more towards the capital markets on a fundraising, and also properly structuring. Because of, let's say, again, my IFI background, did this was a good tool that I could use, and for this was, for me, was a typically a completely unorthodox approach, let's say, for someone, you know, from traditional sector stepping into the crypto. And I'll be very honest, it took me some time to be convinced that is not some Ponzi scheme, because I'm like everyone else at the time was reading FT Economist, and, you know, and I was basically saying, okay, what is this stuff, you know?
I remember those headlines. It was very, very bearish about, yes, the Ponzi angle would come up in every article. Yeah.
And I was basically actually let's say, I was a victim of this. You know, obviously, I read this financial sort of times, and I like media outlets, and obviously you're thinking, okay, you know, what is this, you know, coming through? But when I looked at the deeper on the background, actually analyzing, you know, what's companies were entering the market, you know, restructuring, you know, this is where I became, let's say, a convinced, you know, this is, I'm not, let's say, again, came through the reading of the white paper, you know, but I came actually from assessment. And I saw that basically it is actually, let's say, the sector in itself is very complex to comprehend, you know, as you join in. And I used my own expertise. I said, okay, you know, let's make it simple, you know. I did it project finance for TMT with traditional data centers. I said, infrastructure is purely data center infrastructure, not uptime institute certified. But if you look at the basic and fundamentals, you know, this is electricity, you know, this is shell and core structures, and high density, you know, of electricity supply required. And from one side, so it's an infrastructure business. And from our side, when you look at actual Bitcoin itself, for me, the easiest was actually to correlate it or align it with commodity business, and especially in commodity business, where you had the traditional, let's say, of metals, because this was like mostly OTC driven market, and this was also for me, you know, I was like, okay, you know, it's a digital gold, whatever they call it, you know, but OTC market, and this is how I basically tried to, you know, for myself initially, I was trying to relate to this sector, and this is how the journey began. And then the process, basically, I was going through, let's say, from a start, I was trying always to merge, let's say, the sector with standards and approaches which is used in traditional sectors, because for even I give you an example, when we started the process for in Kazakhstan, you know, it's a startup project, you know, we're like, okay, we have a capital story potential developing here, you know, it was a big commitment from groups, actually. Those are two groups. One was a Kazakh, basically, founders who had access to the energy, and from our side it was Genesis Mining, which is Marco Kron, Marco Strength, basically the guys who were pioneering in terms of whole Bitcoin mining development in Iceland, you know, Sweden, you know, and I was like, okay, you know, the storyline is there, but at the same time we are in an environment which is very hostile, you know. And one of the things where I remember from the start, I think 2 months into the project, I was like, guys, you know, we can't build a capital market story without actually trying to engage in policy dialogue with the government, because every second, you know, week we have a news coming out where the central bank or someone else says, you know, this is a Ponzi scheme, you know, should be shut down. I said, we need to actually engage. And this is where from January 2018, the association was formed, which became actually a platform for the discussion and eventually led to the development of this whole legal framework and legislation in Kazakhstan, where this Bitcoin mining sector actually became part of the economy. Truly, it's with proper tax codes, and all of it. But I think this is where basically I saw one of the interesting parts, that in a way it's the sector Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin in nature, it's more, like let's say revolutionary. But at the same time, if you want to, let's say, to have a stability, and especially in the capex intensive business, you do need stability, because in your it's a long-term investments. I mean, this is where you actually have to follow the traditional route, and this is how my journey sort of began in Bitcoin mining. And if and till now, I obviously build my expertise inside the sector, but at the same time, I see the more we're advancing in it, I see there is more correlations, and let's say it's more links with traditional industries and the setups that exist, or let's say the pro forma, how it's make it easier for me, because I see that some of these templates they're actually taken from the conservative banking, approaches which is there, and they actually sort of the sector have to, let's say, accept it or be sort of sidelines, So so that's
talking about those parallels, right, between banking, commodities, and now crypto. If you can explain to the audience kind of what are the similarities that you're seeing, because for you it's second nature. For some people who are new, or who don't have that alpha, the access or the experience, in what ways is it similar that is helping you or helped you to understand crypto and Bitcoin?
Well, let's say again, I broke it down, and I still stick to these two parameters. It's Bitcoin mining consists of two parts. One is infrastructure business, and this is easy to understand. I mean, everyone can relate to it. Like we all use cloud services, and this is a typical example. You have a data center virtually somewhere, close proximity wherever you live. I mean, who is listeners, and this is where the serverless are located, and basically the facility has access to the telecom and basically to the energy supply. The only difference, let's say, from traditional data centers is that the traditional data centers which servicing our needs of the cloud, they are mostly certified, by the Uptime Institute, for example, which we have a follow certain requirements. With Bitcoin mining, it's much more simple. You they can cut the corners on some optimization, but what's vital and what is there is the telecom, and the energy supply. And energy supply, again, this is where a slight difference comes in. I mean, it's the Bitcoin mining is consumption 24/7. So basically, if you are utilizing 20 megawatt facility, you'll be very likely utilizing up to the maximum 24/7, unless basically you have to do a shutdown or some agreements for a grid operator or something else. So this is where it becomes, let's say, the easiest. And this was actually one of the tools we also used when we policy dialogue with the government, because we said, okay, guys, listen, this is a remote location, up north in Kazakhstan. You have access capacity of 700 megawatt. I mean, you generate it because you cannot shut down, because I mean, you have a huge energy facilities there. You're trying to attract foreign direct investments. It takes time. Challenging exercise. I mean, what's best for you? I mean, you best for you is just to sell this kilowatt hours locally and just trying to add some markup, to that. And data centers. I mean, regardless of what data centers, I mean, Bitcoin mining is the easiest and fastest moving client which you can ever get. It was the best optimal solution. We even took a group of some government officials to Sweden up north, because I mean, this is where it was an excellent case studies, because back in 2007, when the crisis hit, many metals and mining companies up north sort of obviously shut down, and they have this abundant energy supply up north. you cannot bring the new facilities, new factories, because you don't have even the infrastructure there. You can
Yep.
imagine bringing a new factory, 500 people with families would be probably 2,000. Kindergarten, schools, hospitals. This is a massive development, and
Yep.
this is where they developed. They are quite advanced, and I do so admire what they've done. They actually attracted the data centers of Facebook was and eventually draw basically the data center and the Bitcoin mining. This is where basically the
Yep.
utilization of energy has happened. So this is how easy to relate, let's say, to the Bitcoin mining, saying you have
And this was
energy.
the government itself who was very proactive and open, basically, in discussing
Yeah.
this.
The
Yeah.
municipality, it's not even the government level, but it's
Okay.
actually the local municipality up north,
Yep.
because they understood, like, who, if not us, who will do it,
Sure.
and they
Yeah.
did it,
Yeah.
and this is definitely great. So basically, this is, let's say, the first part, which is because anyone can easily relate to, it's and
Yep.
especially now with all the AI coming through, this is becoming even more easy, because we're all using all the
Yep.
different tools, and this is where actually the intensity of the use of energy, and let's say the server equipment is actually very much aligned with the nature of Bitcoin mining, because we're
Yep.
operating 24/7. And the other side, let's say, this is the Bitcoin mining, let's say, as a byproduct, the actual what comes out of the hash rate or whatever the
Yep.
calculation. This is for me, it still actually is. It's a pure OTC commodity trading business,
Got it. Okay.
because
Yep.
so this is where you have, in our case, we have a digital commodity, but it's like any sort of metals, let's say, not obviously oil, which is a very big market, or gold, but I think it's still OTC, because we do have certain limitations about how many venues, regions, and availability of liquidity of bitcoins is there. So
Yep.
this is where it's easier, let's say, for anyone to relate to.
Got it. Okay. In terms of the first point that you mentioned, this was back in 2017, right? That time period.
Yeah, 2017, 18, yeah.
Do you see, of course, like any market that matures, the gaps get closed and reduced over time? Do you see any opportunities like that with certain countries at the moment? Of course, energy is always around. Is that something that's been already optimized by companies coming in and making deals, or do you still see those deals open and available?
Let's put it this way. I think this is where the Bitcoin mining as a sector is very unique, because
Yep.
the whole methodology behind is built in such a way that you're always trying to eliminate less efficient players,
Yep.
and
Yep.
then you have a technological progress, and also always challenging you, and regulation. What I found, let's say, purely because I already went through, let's say, the second sort of halving cycles, 4-year
Yep.
cycles. What I do see, it's at least is my observation,
Yep.
no country ever survives 2 cycles, and always
Mm.
something happened within the first 1 cycle already, because you
Yep.
can have a boost, and then it's definitely will be a stagnation or decline, and this is what is interesting here, because we have a sector, its evolution is developing, obviously its evolution, it happens in 2 ways. One is purely physical allocation of infrastructure, and this is
Yep.
where some of regions which had the excess capacity of energy is very likely they will be utilizing them within a 4-year cycle, either for the mining itself, it's a small country, or for other, because we are living in a very energy intensive world nowadays,
Yep.
and the situation will only get, let's say, with more pressure building up, and this is actually the pressure also on the mining side. And this is what I in my sort of thesis of how I look at the Bitcoin mining and geopolitics. This is where I always challenge even colleagues in the sector and say, guys, we are actually in a position where we should, if we start competing for energy, this is where the dead end comes, because the
Mm.
government and everyone will start sort of going after you,
Yep.
using different tools. And this is what part of evolution, why we have, let's say, the migration, If you look
Yep.
at this, we have continuous migration, and it will continue, because if you look at it globally, I mean, maybe we will not have this the massive pockets of concentration like we have China, Russia, US, because we
Yep.
have a smaller locations. But this is all where it's actually maybe good for Bitcoin mining, because it will be more decentralized going to the small locations, especially on global south, where you have a lot, let's say, different opportunities there. So this is one of the developments taking place. Another one, which is also making a massive alterations to the sector, is actually the convergence. What I mean convergence is convergence with other sectors, because Bitcoin mining, let's say,
Mm.
back
Yep.
2017, 18, it was pretty simple. People were saying, and again, I might be sounding a bit critical even to colleagues from the sector, but let's say back 2017, 18, 19, the defense line for Bitcoin mining was, we are sustainable. We are using to dry wood, to
Yep.
warm up with airflow, some greenhouses. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I saw, let's say, the biggest positive impact was, I remember, like it was -40, -50, North Kazakhstan. 20 megawatt airflow comes out, and you have a lot of docks which could freeze to death, but actually they are there,
Yeah. Yeah.
But in a way to utilize that amount of hot air, I mean, you do need to go like more on industrial scale. And this is what's
Yep.
actually happening nowadays, because obviously the sector pushed, let's say, more into the areas of actually industrial sites or close proximities to some developed areas, which do have a certain requirements. And at the same time, technology allows us, the cooling system. I mean, this is actually, I think it's quite sad that the traditional data centers do not pay attention to the cooling, which is used
Yep.
by Bitcoin mining, especially like liquid cooling, because it's pretty advanced, and this is
Yep.
where actually the byproduct of the heat reuse comes in, because I
Yep.
mean, technically, I mean, you can run a boiler or you can run actually the Bitcoin mining equipment, and especially it makes sense if you actually connect to close proximity to the district heating in let's say the cold air regions, or even if you look purely on industries, there's a lot of industries which actually using in technological process the hot water, let's say from 50 to 120 degrees. And this is
Yep.
where basically Bitcoin mining could be additional as well. So this is where I see, let's say, the sector is pivoting as well.
Mm.
And also, as you understand, as you're pivoting into this convergence of sectors, you have actually other sectors paying attention to this. And this is what
Yep.
I see, the energy and utility sector, waste management, including, all of them are actually seeing that, okay, this is actually a tool, it could
Mm.
be a tool, a segment that we actually can use internally. It's
Yep.
it's like,
Yep.
for example, if you look at purely in our example, data centers. In data centers, you do have a certain situation where the large energy holdings or telcos actually also have exposure to the data centers, because for them it's a natural process, because they have,
Yep.
let's say, controlling the telecom pipe, or they're controlling the energy supply. And this is what probably will be also happening with Bitcoin mining sector. So
Yep.
uh,
How many people work on a typical mining operation, like on the actual ground, supervising or launching and then supervising?
well, I mean, I'll break it up, because I mean the technology now
Yep.
with the liquid cooling can scale down for you with certain overheads in terms of
Yep. Yep.
personnel. But generally, let's say if you have 20 to 50 megawatt, you definitely will have 20, 25, 20, 20, 30 people, because some of them shift workers,
Mm.
you do
Yep.
have people in security, generally with shift. We have maybe some static member of personnel, which are the directors, some of them
Yep.
sort of internal, and they have engineers, I mean, definitely the organized, so you have 3 shifts. So yeah, you probably
Yep. Yep.
will be having this. But again, this is an
Got it.
important aspect when you go into remote locations. I mean, what people
Yes.
are saying, like,
Yep.
and this is what I saw myself with my own eyes,
Mm.
in Kazakhstan, up north. I mean, there is no other industry which will employ, for example, young guys,
Yeah.
guys
Yeah.
from 25, 30 years, the technical guys.
You have to bring them there.
Yeah.
There's nothing around. Yeah. Yeah.
But if you bring them there, that's going to be expensive. I mean, then
Yeah.
people will say, okay, do I want to come there? But this is
Yeah.
where actually you grow the local, and this is even better, because I mean,
Yeah.
people actually do see that they graduate and they understand, okay, this is where I can go and work, and this
Yeah.
is, let's say, it's a clean industry.
Yep. Yep. When it comes to the so how if you look back 2017, it's 8 years now, right? So how has it evolved compared to now? If you go back and you look at those areas of the world, how is it how how does how has the mining evolved, but also like the thinking companies actually mining? Of course, now it's you have major US companies publicly traded mining. What's your view on the evolution of mining?
Well, it's a massive steps. I mean, if you compare it to what it was,
Yep.
and this is where also it's affecting somehow even the players, because I mean you have to adjust to mentality and adoption of the sector.
Yep.
Because let's say before, I purely, let's say, just from experience, you have some abandoned warehouses. You're thinking, okay, let's make it clean, and we
Yep.
plug the machines, and this is
Yeah.
running. Now, I mean, this is maybe for pleb, type of developments, people doing in a garage, but if you want to go industrial, I mean, this is becomes
Mm.
different, there's
Yep.
more alignments actually, and push, because and let me put it this way, part of a push is actually happens, you want to access capital. If you want
Yep.
to
Yep.
access capital, this is where you come to the traditional template, where you speaking to the funds or some institutional guys. I mean, they obviously will not adjust their pro forma template for you.
Yep.
They have a mandate, and they will say, guys, you either tick the box or you don't.
Yep.
And this is what encourage actually sector to go. It makes it more institutional focus,
Yep.
which is maybe not good, because it leads to some oligopoly centralization, let's say geographical or maybe on a type of players. But at the same time, it pushes us to, let's say, to progress,
Yep.
because obviously the competition, this is part of competition and part of survival.
Yep. So remember, of course you remember because you're in the space. But for those who don't remember, the right around the end of the last cycle, we had Elon saying that they're removing Bitcoin from Tesla. That was one of the first bearish tweets that kind of brought the market down. And of course, China then saying, "Hey, all the miners are out overnight." One of the big announcements. What actually happened? And then literally, there were videos circulating on Twitter of them closing shop and then moving. What happens in those situations when a country says, especially like China, that can be very very direct with the way they do things. Okay, closing this down. What happens to them? Because these are large infrastructure plays, right?
Mm. Well, China, let's put it, China is a specific case, because I think you need to look, it's not like China banned it overnight.
Yeah.
For China, first of all, the Bitcoin mining sector was an excellent facilitator of scaling down and enforcing the energy generating infrastructure, because you had a lot
Mm,
of abandoned, let's say,
sure.
the power sites, which actually
Yep.
kept the light and operational. And this is great opportunity, because this is
Yep.
where the sector did played a vital role in the energy sort of, let's say, within the energy sort of sector.
Yep.
Where the problem was, and I think with China, it's always they're very much focused on it. This is a capital control, because if you look at
Hmm.
the history of China, starting with forex business, gambling,
Yep.
I mean, this is where people were using this, actually to export, the capital outside,
Yep.
beyond, the traditional control. And this is obviously the crypto, purely on a large scale. Crypto was an actual the instrument for bypassing the capital control function.
Capital controls of the actual country. Yep.
Yeah. So, and I think this is actually what played a vital role there. This is
Mm,
and then taking into account the size of the country, we're like probably was like, okay, for us it's a drop in an ocean,
yep.
because I mean, that's why we better shut it down than deal with
Yep.
it, because do a policy and all these things, and at the same time, we did not kill the players. The players actually survived. The large players, they went out,
Yep.
and this is
Yep.
actually also good for the Chinese business. They expanded, We expanded
Yep.
through our regions. We went to US. Our locations. So this is, let's say, that was a shock wave initially.
Yep.
It did make some implications because just overnight, you can imagine people start moving. It's a
Yep.
large quantity of stocks. People trying to relocate. There is a big influx of illegal mining was taking place in many regions. And actually
Yep.
Kazakhstan suffered actually because of that. Even though they're saying it's some pressure was brought up by the miners. No, actually the pressure was brought in, by corruption because some of the mining operation and because of a border with China, they smuggled them.
Yep.
And for example, I was always fascinating to hear when people were saying that they're mining on the south of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is divided into three parts. The north,
Yep.
which is they have a massive excess capacity of energy. South, which was constant in deficit, and west, basically, which was with some profit, like and self-sufficient. So for me, it was always in the mining sector, in Bitcoin mining sector, was quite a shocker to hear that someone does a large operation on the south, because I was like, okay, it's always in deficit.
Yep.
And then also the influx of this China exit happened, obviously going across the border, illegal smuggling of hardware, plugging them in, and I think this is where you see in
Yep.
many regions where people are trying to pick it up and say, oh, look, they are shutting down Bitcoin mining. No, they are shutting down the illegal business operation or theft of energy,
Yep.
because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
this is one of the cases I even can refer to Russia, because we are saying
Yep.
like Russia, was actually exactly the same case. Government is not against it because this is a great consumer if it's actually
Sure.
legitimate, and paying taxes.
Yep. No, I think that's a great point, because I think there's so much lost in translation, literally and figuratively, about what happens, right? It's like China bans Bitcoin. That's what you see on CNN, and then when you get into the details, it's actually no, it's always more intricate than that. I'm curious to talk about have your take about geopolitics. The CIA came out yesterday or a couple of days ago talking about the importance of when it comes to the rivalry with China about specifically Bitcoin and crypto. You've been also involved cross-border and everything. I'm curious to hear your take. Maybe explain to everyone why is the CIA now interested publicly? They've been interested for decades. Why is it now a deal where they are literally going out on podcasts and interviews talking about this in regards to China and the rivalry?
Let me divide here also into two parts, because one part of, let's say, Bitcoin ecosystem is actually the Bitcoin, the trading flows, the
Yep.
actual, let's say, a transaction means, for,
Yep.
this is where basically they're using the different tools of the screening of forensics, trying to identify the movements, and who is using crypto. This is separate, part. What I see, let's say, more, which is goes into the core of geopolitics, is actually the infrastructure business itself. And this is what becomes a very competitive and interesting composition. And this is where there is a direct competition, let's say, US, Europe, Russia, and the whole BRICS bloc, And I give you again here as an example. You have, you obviously, if you look in the global south, you have South America, which had goes through the turbulent waves because the US control, lost in some places, with the China involvement, the whole BRICS. You have Africa with the whole Wagner group, initially creating this whole wave, and then the whole development taking place. This is, I mean, if we look at the actual fundamentals, I mean, there is not about the democracy, it's about control of resources, and this is the interest where the interest of Russia, China, Europe, US, is all trying to coexist and compete there. And this is, I think, becomes, I will expect that part to, unfortunately for Bitcoin mining, this is where the Bitcoin mining can also be sort of picked up and used as an instrument. Because, and again, I give you an example so it's much easier to comprehend, Let's take Ethiopia, Ethiopia, there's a huge boost taking place over the last 18 months for Bitcoin mining.
Yeah.
It's great. You think, wow, it's amazing, But if you look at on the back of it, it happens in a region which actually doesn't have a grid connection to the main part, mostly.
Mm.
It has an excellent hydro resources.
Yep.
It's a capacity of creating a large scale industrial sort of energy production there, generation facilities, and this is what is happening. And it's obviously supported by Chinese,
Yep.
We do understand the grid will be eventually connected, and which it becomes an excellent let's say, geopolitical instrument for the country, because obviously they will be sort of exporting energy to the neighboring countries, and developing
Yep.
their own industries. So you understand this is automatically becomes goes into the area of geopolitical,
Rivalry.
competition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, and this is where it becomes completely interesting, because with China, obviously, if you are in remote location like this, you're trying to establish 400, 600 megawatt capacity. I mean, there's
Yep.
no way you can find an industries, or some FDI coming there and developing the
Yep.
sites, So what's the best solution? It's only Bitcoin mining, because this is someone that comes
Mm.
in, rolls out within the 6 months, 9 months.
Yep.
I mean, you can start scaling up this facility, and eventually over time you can phase it out,
Yep. Yep.
And this is naturally will happen because the miners will need to, let's say, to replace their hardware or do an upgrade, in a certain time frame, and it's very likely will
Yep.
be in the next 5 years. So this is an excellent tool where you're able to assist the government in creating their vital infrastructure. And this is
Infrastructure.
vital infrastructure.
Yeah.
This is vital for the government, for the future of their people,
Yeah.
Ethiopia,
Yeah.
regardless if it's Chinese, the Russians, or Americans, whoever finance it, they, at the end of the day, we're going to have an energy infrastructure inside the country.
Yeah.
And this is the, let's say, this is the interesting block. And if we, let's say, spice it up with some geopolitical conflicts, that specific region, using the hydro resources which are vital for the supply of Nile, basically, and for Egypt. Egypt is very aligned
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
agribusiness. That's
Yeah.
why Egypt is very upset with this. And obviously, and Egypt in its own ways trying to sort of send some of the military support to Somalia to basically to put the pressure from our side. So this is where you actually looking and sometimes at Bitcoin mining operations. But at the same time, you need to let's say, take a step back and say, okay, guys, actually, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And again, I'm using it, let's say, I use the tool, let's say, how I project it. I use it because I worked at the bank at EBRD, and
Yep.
EBRD was, it's founded by the governments. It's I do understand, like the real part of sometimes developments in some regions.
Yep.
And also when I worked in traditional mining, I did see it, especially like in Latin America.
Yep.
That's why I see that as it's over decades there is continuous tension and let's say competition for resources, and
Yep.
it will not going to go away, and I think
Yep.
this is where this is quite unfortunate, but I think this is why we're actually going to see more and more interest from governments in infrastructure and also the actual digital assets themselves. But I think
Yep.
infrastructure is much more easier to, let's say, understand, because this is where you can actually physically position it, because
Yep.
Bitcoin, it can move. This one is basically, if you do have a stationed energy generation, and you obviously will have a next to it Bitcoin mining. Yeah.
So this is a question we got in one of the groups when it comes to actually mining, right? When you look at the oil business in the US or even in the Middle East, you know that it's, it could be US companies coming in, supplying the infrastructure, and then working out a deal with the local government, right? How does it work when it comes to mining? Specifically, of course, Bitcoin mining. Who owns, you mine this Bitcoin in these countries? Where does the Bitcoin go, number one, and how much Bitcoin can actually be mined? Just to give an example, like a general kind of overview of how much Bitcoin is actually mined by these these entities or these setups in a warehouse, or talk about that a bit, just to give some numbers.
Let's first again, I want to make some correction. When you
Yep.
talk and when people in generally talk saying, okay, we have a mining operation, let's say, I give you a very easy example. We have a mining operation in Nordic, Sweden and Norway.
Yep.
It's true that you do well, at least you had it before. Now it's to the less extent, but this is a good example. Why? Because it was genuine a lot of operation up in those regions, but they are not mining Bitcoin. This is purely data center segment, which is only
Yeah.
this part of the infrastructure. Because the Bitcoin usually was taken and generated outside. For example, Kazakhstan. If you look at
Yeah.
Kazakhstan before the legal framework was finally put in place, and this is what Russia did actually. Before that, you only had the data center basically and the server equipment, sort of IT type of work done. The actual Bitcoin was generating, for example, in Switzerland, where it's
Yeah.
legitimate, where you have access to the banking system, where you can officially can change your Bitcoins for fiat and basically and actually send the money back and do the payments.
Yeah.
And this is where it becomes, again, very critical in some regions where people saying, yeah, we have a region which is excellent. I say, guys, you do not have an official payment methods to send money back to the country. You're using the different rails, the different schemes. And this is not sustainable. I mean, it's okay if you have a small operation, but if you are talking about number, let's say 10, 20 megawatts, I mean, this is very capex intensive and this is very high risk. And this is where I would say that this is where we're going to see probably some of the pressure coming from local governments, because this is where they will they do understand that, let's say, they understand they need a player to come in and take an energy,
Yep.
to become a local consumer. But the next, obviously, as soon as they see that the play is there, the appetite comes, as you start eating. They'll say,
Of
okay,
course.
they're gonna
How
say,
much more
okay,
can you get?
and they're gonna say, oh, why do you have your profit center up there? You should
Yeah.
bring it back here.
Yeah.
And this is where we're gonna see it. I think I will not be surprised, because it will happen for two reasons. It happens for, obviously, for the transparency,
Yeah.
for the sort of tax payments to the budget,
Sure.
and also, let's say, for which probably going forward will be more and more vital, it's actually the BTC liquidity, because I mean this is a new coins which
Yeah.
is generated.
Yeah.
And this is, if you look, for example, Kazakhstan, it's imposed, basically you have to sell it internally. Russia is actually sort of doing a pilot now. They did it more smart way. They did not sort of shut it down completely, but I will not be surprised if we create the environment where it's much better just to sell the BTCs internally. And Russia
Yeah.
is a big market, it's the second biggest after US. So it's and might be the case for US. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. So of course, I ask because it's a question that you just go talk to someone in the local government, and then you figure out the operations, and you make Bitcoin. It's much more complicated than that. And then of course there's cross-border stuff. So the question when it comes to when governments come back and say, hey, wait a minute, where's this Bitcoin going? Let's work something out. Do you think this leads to governments wanting to then think about better on and off ramp systems locally? Does this bring more to the space, or is it really more a means of like, okay, we need to tax this, we need to know how much is being made, etc.? So is it more an altruistic, or both?
Actually, purely from my, let's say, experience observation to date, let's say maybe for some small governments, like small countries, maybe some of this generation, it's vital, and then they doing this PR, creating a strategic reserve,
Yeah.
because it does make sense for them, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at the scale of some large countries, like even Kazakhstan, it's small in comparison to Russia, but still for them, it was purely economical, the budget, control function. They said, okay, guys, you're creating some potential, upside, outside of, let's say, offshore jurisdiction. I mean, bring it back. Russia, this is probably the best example of this really, number two country in terms of Bitcoin mining. They do understand this sector for them is important, because let's say it's important, again, in the regions which they allow. Some of the regions, they said, guys, you're not supposed to have a mine in the first place here, or you are stealing the energy. You're using the domestic energy, which is supposed to be for residentials and for that purposes. But at the same time, Russia has, like, I give you an example, in the northwest of close to Finland, because of 22 events, and Finland's rolled out their own nuclear power plant. There is a 1.2, I think 1.2, 1.5 gigawatt of capacity became available. And obviously you cannot, let's say, you cannot transport it far, because this is up north, Arctic Circle side. This is obviously an excellent opportunity to develop clusters there. So let's say this is where the Bitcoin mining as a potential legitimate sector is interesting for the government. And at the same time, Bitcoin, which is generated by Bitcoin mining in Russia, it's a drop in the ocean to be using it for any sort of, as someone saying, sanctioned avoidance. Because if you look at the overall volume of Russian trade, happens on a daily basis. Bitcoin mining, it cannot play any sort of role there, whatsoever.
The news loves to paint this as the way they're going around sanctions, but yes, it's a drop. It's a great headline, but it's
actually what I see. It is developing into is that it will develop into the internal products, financial products, because this is where you have a clean Bitcoin generated inside the country,
by the country itself, sure.
By the country's players who are registered with all the tax authorities, and they're going to say, okay, these bitcoins were originated, the source of it was purely Russian, and let's use it as a financial product and sell it to some qualified investors, retail investors in the country, direct exposure to the BTC. Again, this is a part of the ecosystem development, but definitely will not play a role, like, for example, people were saying, in Venezuela, it was playing on some other countries.
Yeah. Can you give some context to people in terms of how much Bitcoin is mined for some of the operations that you've seen? They don't need to be yours, but just so people understand that, okay, if how much are these miners actually making? What are the margins like? What are some of the numbers that you see on the ground?
I just wanted to just 1 second. I'll probably bring up in terms of calculator. So basically, it would make much more easier saying, okay, if it's 1 megawatt, and I'll give you just 1 second. So if we say it will be 6 cents, and we pick up a device. Just okay. S21 200 hash. I just wanted okay.
No, this is great. People love numbers, so they
I'm just saying, basically, just plain and simple, you have a tariff for 6 cents, you have a unit which is S21, which is one of the leading Bitmain hardware, 200 terahash. It can generate you on a daily the daily income of $5. So it will generate you probably profit in a month in the BTC. Well, let's say it's $140 a month. It will generate you profit, post.
Got it.
So, and this machine basically consumes 3.5 kilowatt. So if we put it in 1 megawatt, 3.5 kilowatt is, I think, it's a couple of cattle you're running continuously in your flat. So 1,000 3.5, so 285 machines. So this would be a megawatt. So let's say this is a 140-foot container, standing there, just pure and simple, 285 machines basically generated for you $140 each, so $40K a month profit.
Got it. So like a shipping container installed, optimized, around $40K a month. In terms of the cost,
it will be subject to adjustments, obviously, but it's
who's getting into these? How do you see the future of the industry? Right, you're very tapped into this space. What's the future? Is it consolidation? Is it small players kind of getting pushed away as the space matures? What are the next 5 to 10 years like for miners?
Um, let's what I mentioned before. You obviously, because of the convergence with other sectors, you're going to
Yep.
have let's say segmentation within the sector will be much more fine-tuned going forward.
Yep.
You're definitely going to have more professional players who actually do the sector convergence, using the flare gas, or basically using oil and gas sector, energy, utilities, for example, waste management is a massive opportunity there, where you have a byproduct, and
Yep.
especially actually with a whole issue that we have now. You obviously saw the issue with Spain with blackout. I
Yep.
don't want to
Yep.
make reference here to the Bitcoin mining because it's quite, it's not the right case. But what's important is basically the let's say the pressure on the energy grid is everywhere is the
On the
same.
grid, of course. Yeah, it does
Yeah,
definitely has weight on the energy grid. Yeah.
and but this is where basically why I want to, let's say, step back. This is for example, where you have waste management side,
Yep.
or even solar. Solar is not a good example because it's not, it doesn't provide you with a sustainable level of energy supply. But let's say waste management side. So you have a biomass, let's say, facility which generates for
Yep.
you, let's say, 5 megawatt. So for you, in reality, to get connected to the grid, you understand, I mean, you have so many permits, so many sort of things to deal
Yep.
with, the costs. So for you, it's much easier saying, okay, guys, we're going to be utilizing the waste. We're going to generate the energy. We're going to use it for internal use, and all the access we're going to utilize for Bitcoin mining. We don't need
Yep.
an energy grid connection. So in a way, this becomes an excellent opportunity. So where basically
Yep.
it's off grid completely. You running your operation, and at the same time, the government knows that they just need to make a commitment and bring these power lines to you, and
Yep.
you'll be able to give them back, some of this energy you generate. So I think this is where one of the interesting developments will be definitely for the sector. There is definitely large developments, especially like Russia, US, China. Well, China is tricky because, I mean, officially we banned it,
Yep.
but let's say still the nature, if you have a large scale energy generating capacity. I did see this example. You have a, let's say, 100 megawatt capacity available. In order to set up and utilize the data center for 100 megawatt is a pretty challenging exercise. I mean,
Yep.
still Bitcoin mining can come in and take 50 or 70 megawatt, each easy. And this is where it becomes a tool. In a way, the Bitcoin mining will be facilitated in some regions, including some regions I mentioned already, like Ethiopia and the like, where
Yep.
basically they need to develop something,
Yep.
and then this is where Bitcoin mining can step in. And then we're going to have the interesting development, which is more, let's say, I will not say it's retail, but quasi-retail. It's where the older generation of hardware, it
Yep.
keeps migrating. So it's the end of a tail, because obviously it becomes less efficient. And I give you an
Yep.
example. At some point, S9s, which was one of the backbone in previous halving cycle,
Yep.
they obviously were going into a completely useless mode in some regions.
Yep.
They found their sort of destination in some, let's say, less official regions, which go and mine some of the sanctioned countries,
Yep.
or illegal mining operation, and this is where it's actually also goes, So
Yep.
in a way, we're always going to have this something,
Sure.
semi-gray type of operations
It
running.
finds its place at some point based on the cost and what can be provided.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and again, it's a pure commercial decision, because
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'll tell you, like, it's purely even commercial decision for legitimate business, because if you're
Yeah.
looking at the risk in some regions, you're thinking, okay, maybe I should not bring the top of the scale hardware there, or buy all
Yeah.
this old stuff, and it runs for 6 months. I get my money back, and then I'll
Yeah.
see if I'm lucky,
Yeah.
I get extra.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. We have a few minutes left. I always end these shows by asking guests about what they think about this cycle. It's a question that the audience loves to know. What's your take on this cycle? It's been very strange relative to the other cycles, in terms of the like price action purely. I'm curious to hear what you think about where we are in this cycle, what's happening, and what the next 12 to 24 months look like.
I mean, here I see the main driver is actually what's happening for us on a global scale.
Yeah.
US, new administration, setting a lot of, let's say, action points. I'll put it this way, I'm quite positive, let's say, on a Bitcoin and a crypto development, as long as basically it's needed for the Trump administration, because I do
Yeah.
understand, if they decide overnight that it's no needed, I mean, they're gonna sort of
Yeah.
we're gonna be in a different type of environment,
Oh
and
yeah.
but I think, let's say, for the midterm. I will not sort of jump it a bit far, but I think for midterm, I mean, it's pretty positive with some volatility. And I think naturally, I mean, if price allows, I mean, and remains, in a good range, we're definitely going to see the mining expanding into some new regions. If we're talking about Bitcoin mining itself.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that it's I agree with you. It's fully dependent on what the Trump administration wants to do with the industry. If it's definitely looking like they want to do, to push it forward, and that's great. But it is very dependent on, solely dependent today on what Trump tweets and what Trump comes up with, and I agree with you. Yeah. I do think that it's I talk about this on the show a lot. I think it's a huge opportunity for countries, especially the not the big players in the world, but the, let's say, the tier 2, tier 3 countries in population and resources today to be bullish on crypto, on mining, because it brings in talent, it brings in infrastructure, brings in money.
Mm.
And it's there's a lot of countries that just now are on the map. If you look at Bhutan or even El Salvador, which 10 years ago, I'm pretty sure that the majority of crypto didn't even know where those countries were. So it's definitely a positive driver, seeing administrations and governments being more bullish to whether it's on the legislation side or the infrastructure side, and being more welcoming to the industry as a whole. So I definitely think that there's, and again, money drives most of these
Mm.
decisions anyway. As soon as governments see, and you could see Lukashenko a few weeks ago talking about, you know about this specifically, if other countries are doing, why not us? And I think it's a question that will be asked by more and more leaders as time goes.
But the only thing is how sustainable it is. If you
Yeah.
actually put the example you gave about Bhutan, basically this is an example similar to Ethiopia, but more, let's say, the compact and nicely done. It's because,
Yeah.
I mean, they're building up energy infrastructure for future of their people. And this is the same, you have the large operators basically loading up a facility and allows the government to do on, their own sort of profit generation, which is great.
Yeah.
Definitely, I mean, for country, El Salvador, unfortunately, I don't know why they did make an excellent, let's say, development from a PR perspective. We
Yeah.
develop an ecosystem,
Yeah.
but on the back of it, I think they were tried eager to get Bitcoin miners into geothermal. But I think this is
Yes. Yes. Yes.
they
Yeah.
so far we did not get it, and I think this is an issue that
Interesting.
about how we did not bridge it yet.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is a part of the sector which is very different because it's a mix of mining, because you have to do the drilling,
Yeah.
exploration work, and energy. So I think this is where, as soon as they find this match, I think they definitely they're gonna be sort of adding the additional sort of plus for their balance sheet as a country, and
Yeah.
as a capital investments, that will be coming in.
Yeah. Dennis, thank you for being on the show. We'll link all your resources. Is there anything, where can people find you? How can people read more and find more about you?
Best it's I think on Twitter, because I
Yep.
mean this is let's say from the crypto sort of space. I mean this is probably the best tool, for
Yep.
interactions.
Okay. We'll link everything. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for joining, everyone. Again, we want to bring super interesting guests who actually do things, who have insights that that only they could have if they actually are very active in the industry in different in different uh, subsections of this industry. We had the co-founder of Tether a few weeks ago. We had guys who are heavy into AI and investing into AI and mining now. So it's and even for me, it's always a great learning opportunity for me to selfishly ask questions to guests who are willing to share. So thank you for being on the show, Dennis. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you got value from this episode, you're going to love what's coming next. So subscribe now. We drop new episodes and videos several times a week featuring power players, market movers, and insiders from the financial world. And if you want access to deals and insights we only share privately, hit the links in the description and we'll see you on the next show.